Greetings everyone, my name is Andrea, also Anna Shell on Discord if you want to ping me or reach me out. If you are a massive ElevenLabs fans, especially in the agent conversation AI portion of their product, this video is pretty much for you. Mostly the goal of the stack I'm building right now is to help everyone like us enable our colleague to work with us on ElevenLabs agent. Right now, it's a bit challenging because if we want to give access to someone with a domain expertise, but not a technical expertise, he can mess up stuff very quickly in the agent itself. And with the needs of having a proper staging, production, automation of conversation for drifting control and quality control and stuff like that, we definitely need a much more robust enterprise permission management and honestly overall system management, and that's what I built. Something that got published on GitHub, but also as Docker, Terraform if you want to deploy it on AWS, on Azure and AWS also with automated script. It is a native Cloudflare infrastructure also, so if you want to entirely host it on the edge with Cloudflare, absolutely possible. It does have a backup and disaster recovery plan system, integration with user management, federated login or SSO or typical system like that. And a bunch of really neat feature in the end to just make your life easier at enabling people in your company to just, help you out with your agent, QA scaling, A/B testing, tons of solution like that. We're going to dive into it. Don't worry. A little bit of a shootout, and I'm going to say that at the end also. If you are an ElevenLabs employees working into GTM, go-to-market, or if you are a ElevenLabs vendor, integrator, very enthusiastic, team who wish to deploy that at scale and accelerate agent adoption, hit me up. Mostly I'm coming from the gaming industry. I published my game on Steam, hacking, cybersecurity game around Kali, Linux, Red Hat, Red Team pen tests and stuff like that, CentOS and Linux and whatever. I drifted into LiveUp, and I've been, for the last 5 years, Microsoft subcontractors in the media and entertainment vertical. And I have the chance to deploy large-scale solution, and especially work on the enterprise aspect of data protection, security, and permission management for various clients in TV streaming, in entertainment, loyalty platform, loyalty layer, stuff like that. But basically, good sense of go-to-market solution for enterprise, acceleration to go-to-market, and that's what I built with this stack. So let's just dive in, show the feature, where I am at, what you can expect for my launch in January, and if there's anything in there that interests you, hopefully there will be. All right, so the first version of it, keep in mind that this is the user interface, the interface your colleague is going to have to interact with the agent and leverage and operate and scale agent that you run in production and in staging and whatever infrastructure you're running. The stack is very simple. We have first a MCP server that is built mostly around the ElevenLabs MCP. Thanks for the ElevenLabs team for that. It's very great. I added a lot of custom tool and a security, permission system. So if you create an API key for one of your dev, or if you activate the MCP server for any of your user, there is a filtering system. There's a security system. So not all tools get exposed. So when the LLM invoke the list of tools, not gonna receive the same list if right now, for example, I'm in a read-only infrastructure and permission scope. So I'm not getting the same tool that if I have the rights to update. And you can also control what I can do with the MCP or with the API, and you're gonna see the reporting and the agent management system. You can control what I can do also at that level, meaning that if I'm authorized only to manage one agent, that's what we're gonna see in the MCP tools, and also that's what I'm gonna see in the reporting and conversation inspection. We can go further than that and say, hey, you're only authorized to manage US-based conversation with customer. You're not allowed to access European-based conversation. So you can really geofence. You can even filter based on the dynamics variable that you push to ElevenLabs. Tons of stuff like that. You could inject even your own. And the way it works is that the API layer, so we have a API layer and the MCP server itself. The API layer make the connection with ChatGPT and whatnot. But the point though is that the entire data and security is enforced before that, meaning that when ElevenLabs return a lot of information, everything's get filtered and never exposed. So if we have any conversation or agent that should not be exposed to the MCP, to the API and to the user at the end of the day, all of that gets filtered out. So we block it and we ensure that the LLM is not even aware that the data exists. And that's kind of like how the principle of a lot of the security enforcement take place. So let's just jump in. I am in streaming mode now. This is a neat feature. So I'm going to list my agent. The streaming mode means that when you present, either you want to share, talk with the client, show to a client something you do on another client, and you often end up where, agent ID leak, client's name leak, a bunch of stuff like that leak. So the streaming mode enables you to censor a bunch of stuff. So you can see here that, client name are censored, a bunch of stuff is censored automatically in the system. And that makes your life a little bit easier when you want to make, demonstration and whatnot. So we're going to see the agent list before, but as you can see, I asked something very simple, list me like 5 agent, and you get like the agent. You can click to get the agent details. We're going to go there. Small quality of life here. It's always convert your UTC into your actual time zone where you viewing this content. So you can click to just move between UTC and etc. So I'm going to actually invoke him and say, can you deep dive in my last conversation with Sylvain and give me an idea of how well my workflow executed. And he can, just here, he connected a bunch of tools. Here's is currently doing the same thing. Is going to connect on a bunch of tools to do the full inspection of, the conversation. And as you can see, it's getting the result and helping me out a little bit in terms of, what's going on and what was the activity in that specific conversation itself. Now, what's really cool with this is that you can run Conversation Simulator, but this is different from ElevenLabs Conversation Simulator. So you can run the simulation itself and say, hey, could you, redo like the routing based on maybe, weakness in my ElevenLabs profile and agent. We can ask it to run the simulation conversation, which is something ElevenLabs provide. But I also develop a custom simulation conversation in which you can actually let ChatGPT 5.2 take control of a conversation with your own extra information, like giving him some insight for it to really brute force the conversation, test the workflow, multiple time execute this. And that kind of like script to which you control much more, in details will result in the GPT being able to understand the answer and give you way more control over it and interact with it, and to brute force it way more interesting. But importantly, you can use those conversations to be replayed and to be tweaked based on real-time data from your backend and stuff like that. So, in the end, the goal is as your agent evolve, you want it to be more robust. So the idea here is that you can run, 200, conversation and see if your next RAG update and staging gets you better quality and you haven't breaked, anything backward. So there's tons of it you can do. And honestly, it's really cool. And it's empower your team. Your team can really kind of like play with it, brainstorm, see what didn't work, analyze conversation with customer, and only I have access to what they are allowed to have access. So let's deep dive a little bit on that and explore the agent conversation browser. So here's what I have is all my agent that has been created. I'm running about 72 agent. And we're going to cover the fact that now you're going to have a full backup and incremental backup, meaning that you're going to be able to have an entire copy of your data in your tenant, S3, R2, whatever you want. And you're going to be able to do partial restore, full restore, migration of agent, migration of part of the agent, like the workflow, for example, and work also, I haven't dived deep into the new versioning, branching of an agent, but already the fact that you can keep your data on your side because employees could delete something that lead into a bad thing. The idea of being able to do that is obviously important for enterprise services and account. And you're going to be able to control your agent in terms of staging, dev versus prod, and really have kind of like this interaction with it. Let's dive into one agent specifically in that case. I see some matrix. At any point in our time, I can download the information in CSV and JSON or copy the ID of this agent. Right now it's sensor. And I can dive a little bit in the conversation. So you can see I have a bunch of conversation that's going on, a bunch of little filter here to help out and say, hey, what was my successful more than 5 minutes, more than 10 message in last 14 days conversation. So you can filter that out a little bit. You can order, shortest, search, whatnot. And you have a little bit of KPI here that tell me, in terms of 30 minutes, 30 seconds, what are my performance rate, and some of the information that obviously you want to have. But the thing that is really cool is there's two aspects to it. The first one is helping your team better read the actual conversation of a transcript. So that we have that in ElevenLabs, but I wanted to push the envelope a little bit. So you have your little timestamp here, ability to speed up the listening of it. And if I just play.
Bonjour Zara, can you speak in French?
So you see, kind of like this execution. But more importantly, I can actually drag. So if I click on it, it's seek automatically. And if I play it, it actually automatically scroll. You have a little bit of tagging, like this tool took 8 seconds, which is really bad. So you can diagnose anything that is too long and whatnot in terms of like this reading and analysis. You can download, obviously, still CSV, JSON, your data very quickly. But the thing I'm very proud of is the workflow. So now you can not only view your workflow and play with it and read the setting, whatnot, but you can load up a conversation and see exactly where the user was in the workflow at that moment. So if I scroll down to the next workflow change and I click, I can see really what happened and which of these workflow got trigger in the conversation, which is, you can imagine, very, very useful when it's time to debug and test out and whatnot. And you still have the same features, speed, play, auto scroll, auto seek, and all the feature that you saw in the other version of it. And you can conversation, you can inspect your node, you can back download, and obviously you can edit. Or you can also leave the ability for someone to edit specifically only the workflow part of your agent, not the entire agent profile. If we go into conversation, it's a little bit the same thing here, but it's really organized by conversation. You already saw that it's not very complex. Now, if you go into download, now this is still mostly where the place I'm still developing in it, but you have the ability to do two types of download, either an entire cloud replication into a bucket, S3, R2, whatever you want, or local backup if like you're a very small operation and you don't need kind of a cloud infrastructure backup. Cloud version has way more feature, but let's run a very small one. Let's back up this agent here very simply, and we're gonna download a little backup. And I'm gonna play with the restore here, very simply, drag and drop. And then I can say, hey, I just want to update my workflow. I don't want to update everything. It's not as complex as that. Want to create a new agent, whatnot. Really can play with it as much as I want. And the idea here is that the cloud version is a bit like that, but way more advanced in, adrenaline, in meaning that you can manage environment. So, stage, dev, environment, etc. You still have granularity of backup. So not if only the workflow has changed, you have the entire versioning of that workflow with differential backup and, control of restore on specific element, including migration of account. So being able to say, hey, I want to migrate those ElevenLabs, user to a different, account, those agents, to a different account, and having the ability to execute all of that. You have backup of all your conversation, of course, and you can also back up all the audio files if you don't want to leave them on ElevenLabs. Very simple, very easy to manage for the team, and as you can imagine, very straightforward. In terms of the permission in the user platform system, very straightforward. So you have your user management imported externally by whatever your SSO system is, or you can control and create your own custom user if you have a small operation again. In the personalization of permission, which is what I was talking about, the fact that my middleware filter out the content that should not be presented to a user and define if the user could even read the information or update or interact with it. If we go into the permission system, first of all, you turn on and off if you can actually use ChatGPT 5.2 to talk with the data. But both ChatGPT and the MCP, credential, as well as the UI here in the front end, because you could connect directly to my API layer or even to my MCP server. I'm going to show you an example of that in Cursor. But here's what happened is that you can actually say, okay, great, I want to give them the ability to chat, but the scope of the data he can access will be limited. Here you have the conversation scope, and you can control the agent scope, obviously, also. So in that case here, we're going to say that the ChatGPT 5.2 LLM can interact with the only no access, and only the workflow and the RAG, for example, and can simulate conversation because we want the user not to tackle the chat itself or even the conversation. In that case, we just want to talk about workflow and workflow optimization and simulate conversation, but not pass conversation to the client. That's the kind of permission you can control. If I go more deep dive here, I can control conversation scope and say, well, you can access only these country of origin, or any of the dynamic variable that you had in your conversation data. You can actually use that as a filtering system. So for example, client region, but I could go with a client type, call type, and say, well, this user can only see conversation of category support, and that's it, nothing else. And after that, you have the different access, and you can say, well, in the case of this agent, you can definitely view the profile, you can update the RAG, can update the workflow and run evaluation, but cannot, here's, the scope here of the API is limited to view and read, doesn't have any delete, but you could add delete also. I don't see the benefit here to give that. That should be completely managed on the backup aspect, and flag for delete versus hard delete and a bunch of stuff like that. Anyway, you got the idea here, and you have the control over that, and you can customize mostly everything, and you have an audit log of everything that has happened and a small toggle between light and dark theme. If I go back to my chat here and I go into Cursor, I'm gonna have the same experience here. So it's connected to the MCP. You can also connect directly to the API. If you hate my UI and you want to tap directly into the API to do everything that you saw, it's basically, the UI is basically just a static React. There's no backend logic, no function. Everything is in the API layer. And after that, mostly the MCP is the same thing with your credential. So if I go on here and say, hey, could you tell me about Clara CEO agent? That will be exactly the same. Currently, this API is limited, and the Cursor will run the MCP tools and execute exactly the same thing as if I had run it into this UI here. Exactly the same thing. And it's doing, in that case, I'm using GPT 5.2, but I could have Haiku, I could have Grok, Opus, whatever you want. And you start getting that. Of course, with Cursor, it's fun because you can actually say, hey, document my that into a .md, run way more advanced script interaction with the agent, and do very advanced stuff. But still, you control the scope, saying, well, that user only have access to this user. Here's your API key for Cursor. Have fun. And mostly that's what it is. So, that's kind of like the high level of what I'm building. I'm very proud of it. Very excited to release that. Again, the goal is that we can run all of that in our tenant always, even bare metal. You're gonna have Docker image if you want to run it on your side without problem. I'm gonna build a bunch of templates. I'm gonna publish one on AWS as well as one on Azure, especially that I'm more a Microsoft person, although I'm comfortable with AWS. That being said, my skill is really Cloudflare, because in LiveUp there was a lot of aspect that Cloudflare. So you can expect a full feature platform in Cloudflare in terms of exactly the same capacity as what you have in AWS and in Azure or in your Docker's functionalities, basically. That's mostly it. That's a lot. Thank you if you followed that much. It's 20 minutes. That's very intense. Like I said to the end, my company, Nexa Staff, deploy AI employee. Now, don't skip. There's still something interesting. It's not a sales pitch. What I work on is to really accelerate the ability for a client to, send money at ElevenLab, if I could say it like that, for the ElevenLab AI employees working on go-to-market. Client who comes to us in less than an hour can spin up with frictionless capacity an AI that they deploy to 1,000 employees. The AI had conversation with those 1,000 employees on exactly, topic, which could be change management, staff onboarding, anything you want, feedback from this week customer, field on agent, can talk through the phone and whatnot. And overnight, we consume all of this knowledge basically and spin up a LLM with an MCP tools that can interact with the knowledge. We spin up a RAG around it, and we also spin up pivot table that you both the user and the client and the LLM can use. So instead of dumping, kind of like Postgres views on the LLM through API, we give the LLM the ability through the MCP to pivot report, analyze report, and whatnot. So it become kind of like a intelligence knowledge interactive platform based on yesterday's 1,000 conversation with our employees. So you can go on and say, hey, give me, feedback on my West Coast product adoption on the, first line of interaction with my consumer. One of the great example I love to say is Sephora. By the way, if anyone has contact at Sephora, let me know. And they launched Road with, Sephora some times ago. Ability to say, I want 1,000, or they have 20,000 employees. If I want 5,000 employees to give me this week, people, in store, give me this week, everyone feedback and kind of like the intelligence that they gather in the field. And I want to have all of that in 24 hours accessible to an entire organization where we can pivot to say, what's the analysis of our, rural area versus city, West Coast versus East Coast, whatever kind of the analysis, really have a rich, platform like that. I leverage a lot Mem0. I'm so excited that ElevenLabs is going to integrate it. So you have this kind of like intelligence when you converse with the clients that is memory and graph memory versus RAG, which is more knowledge. And after that, you gather it in, etc. So anyway, that's kind of like the big picture. If you want to reach me out, I spin up a very simple short website that you can take a look at, which is the 11Guard, website where you're going to be able to download, and everything, whatnot. And you have a bunch of the feature I recap. I kind of like did those Photoshop censorship on it, but with the streaming feature now that is active, I'm going to use that and update my little screenshot. You can go on and, review kind of like the highlight of what you see. And if you're excited, you just ping me out, in terms of feature set, things that you love, will love to see me added and whatnot, or wait for the repo and the Docker image and have fun with it. And you just, contact me here, or you can obviously have access to me on Discord. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys gonna have a great, Christmas and have fun, and that you have as much fun as I have running my 76 little AI agent in AI employees within clients. And honestly, it's insane what we do. We work a lot with, but one of the example was repair and installation of fiber fiber optic, cable. Clients have 500,000 architect plan with tons of precise data, and basically can able to call the conversation engine and say, hey, I'm like in this logo, where's the fiber line? It's like, yeah, sure, it's there. I'm gonna text you the exact number. If you are on your computer, pull out the information. It's very, very exciting. Have Mem0 to know exactly, oh, this is Andrea and he always have this problem. Do reporting of all those conversations back to the head office and say, hey, we have a 500 reparation last night. This is everything you need to know. And finally, you can do it by web and whatnot. That's the stuff I do and have so much fun doing it. So hopefully the same on you guys, and anyone hit me up if you're excited by that, interested by what I'm doing, and anything else. And if you want to talk gaming or try my game on Steam, you can still buy it. A little bit old though. It's a hacking games, Red Team. Lets you replay some of the biggest hack of the history and whatever. I mean, it's personal passion. All right, thank you very much for your time. It's very, very kind. And the link for this website is just at the bottom. You can click to visit the link or ping me on Discord. Like I said, have a nice day. Bye.